that a lone female was representing herself with the FBI led authorities to call the FBI to say, somebody's down here impersonating an agent.
Yeah, they weren't ready for it. It's so dangerous. These are people that are killing. She knew more than anybody in the room.
None of this happens without Dr. Burgess.
Dr. Burgess, Abigail, good afternoon. Jeff in Las Vegas.
Yes,
Hey, Jeff.
we're in Boston.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me to talk about Mastermind to Think Like a Killer, streaming on Hulu. Dr. Burgess, how did your life change one day with a phone call from the FBI?
It really did change, yes. And I was hesitant. It's a good thing I said I'd do it because I wasn't sure I was going to do it. I've been talking mainly to nurses and crisis workers, all female. And of course, I knew that it was going to be pretty male down there. And but I went down. I was brave, right? And so was able to, they were very welcoming. I will say that. They were certainly a little suspicious, as you would expect, but they listened. And that's what I had asked them to do, is to listen.
And why did we see such a resurgence of serial killers in the 70s, 80s, and 90s?
Yeah, and that was true. As I think back, I think that because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to investigate. And that was actually the title, was the first video that was done, No Apparent Motive. And that's what they were faced with. They had these cases coming in, but they couldn't put them in the little boxes. You know, it wasn't a robbery, it wasn't a abduction, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. And so they had to do something because more and more were coming. So that was the task, is finding out what was going on with it. And I think we've seen a decrease in the amount of serial killers. We are finding them. Just look around the country. We've certainly got some cases ongoing right now. But it wasn't the numbers of like 18, I think there had backed up that many. So I was so glad they wanted to do something. I was interested because they would be victims that I hadn't studied. These were victims that didn't survive. And I felt we needed to talk about that. What could we learn from how they were murdered? Could we contribute to learning how to prevent that? That was my task.
And Abigail, how did you first hear of Dr. Burgess and her story?
You know, it was actually brought to me, Hulu and Campfire, the production company, brought the series to me. They were looking for a director to kind of take the creative lead on the project. And my background is not in true crime. And so I think they thought, maybe I'll have a fresh take on a genre that's become quite saturated. And I got to sit down and have a conversation with Dr. Burgess, and, that very quickly realized that I wanted to be a part of this.
And Dr. Burgess, sitting across from some notorious serial killers, who are some of the names that you spoke with throughout history?
Well, certainly from our standpoint, we had all the big ones, but we also had a lot that people don't know about. And because I think that's important, not to just do the high profile ones like Kemper and Dahmer and BTK and Richard Speck and those were certainly headline cases, but Ed Gein was one that was important he did very different things. And certainly Dwayne Samples was another. All of those were ones that were slightly less high profile, but contributed a lot. Their interviews provided really important information on how they thought about committing this, how they planned it. That's mainly what we were interested in, is how did they plan it, what we call the organized type of crime that were hard to catch. We were as interested in how hard it was to catch them, and as well as, of course, the motive. Now we finally had a category, if you will, to put them in.
And Abigail, accessing footage and recordings, did you have a lot to sort out for the series? You had a treasure trove of material, didn't you?
Well, Dr. Burgess has some archives.
Okay.
that we had to keep digging through to get everything. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of incredible. Obviously these tapes are quite chilling. So for me, listening to those was surreal, just I'm sure as it was for Dr. Burgess the first time that she listened to them. But yeah, it was amazing that we were able to use so many incredible original archives to be able to tell the story.
And Dr. Burgess, how did you balance your life? You know, you were a mother of 4. Also, you were, a woman doing a man's work. You're accused of impersonating an FBI agent. You tried to balance your life. And how did you accomplish that when it was a time that wasn't accepted?
Well, probably because I was not, I didn't get a lot of attention, and I liked that. I was in the background, so I could do my work without getting a lot of, the agents were out there in the front doing their thing, so to speak. And so I was working with the victims, and remember back then the victims weren't that important. They didn't, everybody was out after the killer, the criminal. So I had plenty of time to put together the important things that I thought and to get them talking about what, and the methodology, of course, that was my job, is how can we collect important data systematically, crunch it down, and be able to come up with something that's going to be useful to the field, because writing for law enforcement is very different than writing for medical professionals or psychiatric. So that was a task. That was a task that I had to figure out how to do, because they were not writers. The law enforcement doesn't do a lot of writing, so to speak.
And Abigail, how did you gain Dr. Burgess's trust to tell her story? I mean, her life was in your hands telling her story.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think Dr. Burgess is kind of was excited to share. You know, these are kind of important stories, and I think telling the story of the work and influencing others is really important to her, and also continuing the work. And also sharing the story of nurses and what nurses can do and how they can contribute. You know, in the Mindhunter series, her character was rewritten as a psychologist. And so that whole part of the story hadn't been told. So I think that, part of the trust building was just understanding what was important to her and making sure that that was a part of the story.
Well, Dr. Burgess, thank you for your service and your pioneer work. And Abigail, what a fantastic series. And thank you both, and good luck with the show.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.